Hi, we're Big Little Feelings.
You know what else is big and little? Batteries.
Big energy.
Little size, and they go in everything.
So we switched to the world's first 3-in-1 Child Shield by Energizer.
It's the only coin lithium battery that has 3 safety features designed to help protect kids.
Secure packaging,
a bitter coating to help discourage swallowing, and an exclusive color alert technology that turns mouths blue when it comes into contact with saliva.
To learn more, visit Energizer.com.
This episode is brought to you by Buffalo Trace Distillery. Powerful yet smooth. Contained but never tame. Proudly going their own way, but never going alone. This is the spirit inside Buffalo Trace Bourbon. Made at Buffalo Trace Distillery, the world's most award-winning distillery. Buffalo Trace is always perfectly untamed. Distilled, aged, and bottled by Buffalo Trace Distillery, Franklin County, Kentucky. 90 proof, 45% alcohol by volume. Learn more at buffalotracedistillery.com. Please drink responsibly.
Thanks for listening to the Red Treehouse, where I tell scary stories to keep you up at night. You can listen to the Red Treehouse on your favorite streaming platforms, including Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Be sure to follow, like, and subscribe. Oh, and leave us a 5-star review. You can follow the Red Treehouse on social media, on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube at Red Treehouse Pod. And if you have a scary story or topic you'd like me to feature on an upcoming episode of the Red Treehouse, email redtreehousepod@gmail.com. This year marks the 50th anniversary of the release of arguably the scariest horror movie of all time, The Exorcist. Adapted from the 1971 novel by author William Peter Blatty, the film tells the story of a young girl, Regan McNeil, who after playing with a Ouija board, becomes possessed by an ancient demon, Pazuzu. Featuring powerhouse performances from its principal cast, The Exorcist went on to garner 10 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture, Best Director for William Friedkin, Best Actress in a Leading Role for Ellen Burstyn, Best Supporting Actor for Jason Miller, and Best Supporting Actress for Linda Blair. It went on to win 2 Oscars, and for over 25 years had the distinction of being the highest-grossing horror film of all time. What you may not know is The Exorcist is based on a true story. The actual, real-life possession and exorcisms of Roland Doe, a teenage boy in the late 1940s. I'll admit, I'm always skeptical when a movie claims to be based on a true story. And for sure, The Exorcist draws inspiration from the Roland Doe story. And despite deviating significantly, there are elements that are adapted directly from the real-life case. I'll admit something else. Of all the stories I've read, the possession and exorcism of Roland Doe scares me more than any other. Stories of demonic possession are fascinating and can even be entertaining. Grab a bowl of popcorn, turn the lights down, and turn on a scary movie. Let's face it though, most of us are skeptical about the veracity of possession and exorcism stories. For some, advancements in the medical and mental health fields have rendered demonic possession and exorcism archaic. But truly, there are some phenomena science cannot explain. And that leaves the door open, however thin, for the paranormal and supernatural. Is it possible that what is easily dismissed out of skepticism may actually be happening? In the case of Roland Doe, there are some elements of the story that may leave you with more questions than answers. Will you sit with that discomfort and consider the possibility that it happened as I'll detail it? Was Roland Doe possessed by an evil spirit? I'll tell the story. You decide for yourself. I'm your host, Will. Welcome to the Red Treehouse. You'll be interested to know from the start, the name Roland Doe is a pseudonym and not his real name. When researching this episode, I came across a second pseudonym, Robbie Mannheim. And though Roland Doe's real name was revealed after his death in 2020, I'll refer to him as Roland Doe throughout this episode. All quotes that use Doe's real name will be changed to either Roland or Doe. The story of Roland Doe began in the late 1940s in the Maryland suburbs just outside of Washington, D.C. 14-year-old Roland, an only child, was close with his Aunt Harriet, a spiritualist who taught him, among other things, how to use a Ouija board to communicate with the dead. Sadly, in late 1948, Harriet passed away, leaving Roland devastated. And in early 1949, it is alleged that Roland used a Ouija board to try and contact the spirit of his dead aunt. I mentioned in episode 7 of the Red Treehouse that it's not advised for someone to use the Ouija board alone, as it can potentially put them in danger. Keep this in mind as you listen to this episode. Soon after, Roland and his family began experiencing what can only be described as paranormal phenomena. What's interesting, though, is at first their experiences were seemingly normal. Strange knocks and scratching noises in his bedroom walls, and a persistent dripping sound in the house. The family did what most of us would do, checked for mice or other small animals, and looked for leaking pipes. They found nothing. Roland's mother attributed these noises to the spirit of Roland's dead Aunt Harriet. So the family continued using the Ouija board to connect with the spirit to leave them alone. Unfortunately, this only made the situation worse. The episodes only grew scarier. The family heard someone walking throughout the house. Household objects flew across the room as if thrown by an unseen hand. Furniture was moved and turned over. And in one instance, a picture of Jesus Christ hanging on the wall shook violently. As time went on, the paranormal phenomenon became increasingly personal. The noises in Roland's room escalated from scratching and knocking inside his walls to his discovering scratch marks on his mattress. The sound of someone walking throughout the house became more targeted. Roland could now hear someone walking around his bedroom. An article from the website novelsuspects.com titled Roland Doe, The Chilling True Story That Inspired the Exorcist, detailed the escalation in activity. Quote, Roland claimed he could hear someone walking in his room at night when he was trying to sleep, and there were scratch marks found on his mattress in the morning. End quote. There are thought to be several stages of demonic possession, and the idea is that possession happens gradually rather than instantaneously. In fact, in an act of cruelty, demonic entities are deceptive in their aggression. First, they draw close to you by masquerading as someone you know and love. Then, they reveal themselves. But by then, it's already too late. There are at least 4 stages of demonic possession. The first is infestation, and this is considered the first stage of escalation and happens mostly at a distance. Disembodied voices, noises, items or furniture moving on their own, or scratching sounds. These occurrences are mostly detached from a person and seem to occur environmentally. Next is oppression, and this is considered the second stage of escalation and involves physical attacks, nightmares, and mental health struggles. These occurrences are more personal and target a specific individual. The next stage is obsession, and this is considered the third stage of escalation. where a person experiences significant difficulty in overall functioning. They become preoccupied with thoughts of the demonic, and they may experience sleep disturbances designed to wear the person down. The final stage is possession. This is considered the fourth stage of escalation, and occurs after a person is so broken down mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually that the invading spirit can now take control. Signs of possession include speaking in a previously unknown language, incredible, even superhuman strength, aversion to holy objects such as relics, holy water, or crosses and crucifixes, knowledge previously unknown to the possessed person, and change in facial or physical features. As Roland fell further into the grips of the demonic spirit, the paranormal phenomenon became increasingly scary. One night, while asleep, Roland's bed began shaking violently, with him on it. And not just the mattress, the entire bed frame rocked back and forth, leaving scars on the floor from the movement of the heavy furniture. The scratches that started in the walls moved to Roland's mattress, and eventually ended up on Roland's body. It was reported the poltergeist activity followed Roland at school, where witnesses claimed to have seen his desk slide across the classroom without his touching it. Roland's family sought help from their doctor, a local psychiatrist, and eventually their minister, Luther Scholz, but they were no help. Scholz arranged for Roland to spend the night at his home for observation, and reported seeing objects and furniture move by themselves. A Guardian article dated December 20th, 2021 states, quote, "The Reverend Luther Scholz, Doe's family minister, eventually wrote to the parapsychology laboratory at Duke University in North Carolina in March 1949 and explained how, quote, chairs moved with Doe and one threw him out of it. His bed shook whenever he was in it," end quote. Scholz quickly realized he was unable to help Roland and his family, and referred them to the Jesuits, who he believed would perform an exorcism. By now, the family was desperate, as whatever was afflicting Roland became more aggressive. Father E. Albert Hughes met with Roland and his family, but initially dismissed them. An article titled "The Well-Documented Exorcism of Robbie Mannheim," dated December 2nd, 2022, describes Father Hughes as, quote, "a young, inexperienced priest who had little knowledge of possession and exorcism. And so he gave them holy water and 2 blessed candles to take home with them for blessing and protection," end quote. This only led to increased activity, so Father Hughes went to the Doe's home, where Roland began speaking with him in Latin, a language he had never studied and was unfamiliar with. It is reported that Roland looked at Father Hughes and said, quote, "O priest of Christ, you know that I am the devil. Why do you keep bothering me?" End quote. Convinced that Roland was possessed by a demon, Father Hughes contacted the Archbishop of Washington, D.C., and was granted permission to perform an exorcism. In March 1949, at Georgetown University Hospital, Father Hughes conducted the first exorcism of Roland Doe. From the start, Father Hughes witnessed Roland's bed move across the room and slam into the wall. He listened as Roland cursed him while he was praying beside him, and he watched as scratches appeared all over Roland's body. At one point during the ritual, Roland managed to free one of his hands from the restraints holding him down. In a feat of superhuman strength, he unhinged a piece of the bed spring supporting the mattress and slashed Father Hughes's arm from shoulder to wrist. The exorcism was immediately stopped as Father Hughes rushed to get medical attention. The wound required over 100 stitches and resulted in Father Hughes never regaining full use of his arm. By now, the family was frantic, and they were desperate to help Roland. Thinking a change of scenery might put an end to the possession, the family considered traveling to St. Louis, where the Does had extended family. One night, scratches appeared on Roland's body. Initially, they were just scratch marks, but eventually the scratches spelled the word Louis, L-O-U-I-S, on his ribcage. The family took this as a sign to travel to St. Louis. Unfortunately, Roland slipped further into possession. The paranormal activity continued despite the family's move to St. Louis. And eventually, Roland's older cousin Elizabeth contacted Father Raymond Bishop, a professor at St. Louis University, a private Jesuit school. Father Bishop visited with Roland and observed him, quote, screaming with scratches welling up from underneath his skin, end quote. Father Bishop quickly coordinated with Father William Bodern, a minister at SLU's College Church, and Mr. Walter Halloran, a seminarian, to seek permission to conduct an exorcism on Roland. An article titled Possession of Roland Doe, the real-life exorcism that inspired The Exorcist, dated June 1st, 2016, reported, quote, the Archbishop authorized the rituals after Bodern and another priest visited the family at home and observed the boy's bed shaking and objects moving on their own. Not to mention, Roland speaking in a guttural voice unlike his own and exhibiting an aversion to sacred objects, end quote. The priests would conduct the exorcism according to the Roman ritual, with Father Bodern chosen to be the lead exorcist. On March 16, 1949, and continuing for more than 1 month, Father Bodern, Father Bishop, and several others conducted nearly 30 exorcisms on Roland Doe. Over time, the men noticed a pattern in Roland's behavior. During the day, he was calm and tranquil. But at night, after putting on his pajamas and getting into bed, Roland would alternate between a trance-like state and screaming in a guttural voice. Objects flew through the air, and he reacted violently to any sacred object brought near to him. On one occasion, an X appeared on Roland's chest, with the priest interpreting that as Roland being possessed by 10 demons. Roland urinated on himself and cursed at the priests. Walter Halloran noted the scratches on Roland's body spelled the words evil and hell whenever the priests attempted to administer communion. During one exorcism, Roland hit Halloran in the face and broke his nose. What's fascinating is Roland had no recollection of the event the following morning. As Easter approached, the priests tried unsuccessfully to administer Holy Communion, with Roland's outbursts growing more violent. On the Monday after Easter, the priests conducted their nightly exorcism, but this time with a few adjustments. This appeared to have a positive impact on Roland, as he was able to recite the prayers with the priests, and he reported seeing, quote, the light at the end of the tunnel, end quote. At 10:45 p.m., something miraculous happened. Father Bishop, who had been documenting the nightly exorcisms in a journal, wrote, quote, in clear, commanding tones, and with dignity, a voice broke into the prayers. The following is an accurate quotation. Satan, Satan, I am Saint Michael, and I command you, Satan, and the other evil spirits to leave the body in the name of Dominus immediately. Now. 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 Then, there were the most violent contortions of the entire period of exorcism, that is, since March 16th. Perhaps this was the fight to the finish. End quote. 7 minutes later, at 10:52 p.m., Roland came out of his trance and said, "He's gone," and recalled seeing St. Michael vanquishing Satan on a battlefield. From that day forward, the demons never returned. And Roland Doe, whose real name was Ronald Hunkeler, lived a normal life. He died in 2020, a month shy of his 86th birthday. The possession and exorcisms of Roland Doe is fascinating and scary. I mentioned earlier that it was the inspiration for the novel and film The Exorcist. Having recently watched the film for an episode of my other podcast, The Horror Lab, and researching for this episode of the Red Treehouse, I'm startled by how similar the movie is to the real-life story. Sure, Hollywood will always take creative license and liberties to a greater extreme. But truly, even if the Roland Doe story is only 10% of the Hollywood version, well, that's terrifying. No doubt you're asking yourself, is this true? Or did this happen the way it was reported? These questions are valid and need to be wrestled with. I mentioned earlier that Father Bishop kept a daily journal of the exorcisms. I'll read you a few excerpts from his first-person point of view. Excerpt 1. Quote, "The mother, grandmother, and boy, while lying on the bed on this night, heard something coming toward them similar to the rhythm of marching feet and the beat of drums. The sound would travel the length of the mattress and then back again and repeat this action until the mother asked, 'Is this you, Aunt Harriet?' The mother continued asking questions, but had no verbal reply. She asked this question, 'If you are Harriet, knock 3 times. There were waves of air striking the grandmother, mother, and the boy, and 3 distinct knocks were heard on the floor. The mother asked again, 'If you are Harriet, tell me positively by knocking 4 times. 4 distinct knocks were heard. Then there followed claw scratching on the mattress." End quote. Excerpt 2. Quote, "On February 26, 1949, there appeared scratches on the boy's body for about 4 successive nights. After the 4th night, words were written in printed form. These letters were clear, but seemed to have been scratched on the body by claws." End quote. Excerpt 3. Quote, "On Friday, March 18, 1949, the fathers began the Litany of the Saints, as indicated in the exorcism ritual. In the course of the litany, the mattress began to shake. Roland was awake. The shaking ceased when Father Bodern blessed the bed with holy water. The prayers of the exorcism were continued, and Roland was seized violently so that he began to struggle with his pillow and the bed clothing. The arms, legs, and head of Roland had to be held by 3 men. The contortions revealed physical strength beyond the natural power of Roland. Roland spit at the relics and at the priest's hands. He writhed under the sprinkling of holy water. He fought and screamed in a diabolical, high-pitched voice." End quote. And finally, our 4th excerpt. from the night of April 18th, when the demons left Roland. Quote, Father O'Flaherty and the brothers were weary and sore physically from the exertion. After 7 or 8 minutes of violence, Roland, in a tone of complete relief, said, "He's gone." Immediately, Roland came back to normal, and he said he felt fine. Roland now explained what he saw. He said there was a brilliant white light, and in that light stood a very beautiful man with flowing, wavy hair that blew in the breeze. He wore a white robe that fitted close to his body. The material gave the impression of scales. Only the upper half of the body of this man was visible to Roland. In his right hand, he held up a wavy and fiery sword in front of him. With his left hand, he pointed down to a cave or a pit. Roland said he saw the devil standing in the cave. Roland felt the heat from the cave and saw the flames. First, the devil fought, resisting the angel and laughing diabolically. Then, the angel smiled at Roland and spoke, but Roland only heard the word Dominus. As the angel spoke, the devil and about 10 of his helpers ran back into the fire of the cave or pit. After the devil disappeared, the letter Spite, S-P-I-T-E, appeared on the bars of the cave. As the devils disappeared into the pit, Roland felt a pulling or tugging in the region of his stomach. As the devils disappeared, he felt a snapping, and then felt relaxed completely. He said that this was the most relaxed feeling he has had since the whole experience began in January. You can find the entirety of Father Bishop's journal online in PDF form. They're a genuinely scary read. But what's interesting is they're considered an authoritative, primary source on the possession and exorcisms of Roland Doe. After all this, we're still left with this question. Was Roland Doe possessed by an evil spirit? I've told you the story. Now you decide for yourself. I'm your host, Will. Thanks for joining me in the Red Treehouse.